Space, as Star Trek reminds us, is the final frontier. But is it the final frontier of earthbound conflict, of a power struggle between the United States and China? That's what my next guest says. Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist, spends a lot of time looking and thinking about space. He's the director of the Hayden Planetarium here in New York. Welcome, Neil.
Thanks, Fareed.
Yeah. So when you wrote this article in Foreign Affairs that I was struck by, in which you
and they made a cover article.
It was a cover essay, and they talked about, and you talked in this article in Foreign Affairs about the fact that we were withdrawing from space, kind of limiting our ambitions at the very moment that China was amping up its program. Are you really worried that we will actually lose the kind of leadership of space?
Well, yes, but more important, there's a lot, space is like proxy for a lot of what else goes on in society, including your urge to innovate. I mean, we're old enough, you remember back in the time, in the 60s and early 70s, where it was just expected that innovations would sort of transform the world. People dreamed about tomorrow, and who brings tomorrow into the present, if not the technologists, the scientists, and the engineers? So that was coincident with the time when we had these great ambitions. In a rather turbulent decade, of course, the 1960s, the most turbulent since the Civil War, for sure, with the Civil Rights Movement and the assassinations, a hot war, a cold war. And the one shining beacon in that period was the moon missions. And everything was possible. It was the World's Fair was in that decade. That was all about tomorrow. And so if you lose your space edge, my deep concern is that you lose everything else about society that enables you to compete economically. Now, of course, we went to the moon because of military motivations, and that's why we stopped going anywhere beyond the moon, because we saw that Russia was done. They were not going to go to the moon. The dreamers back then were thinking that we went to the moon because we were explorers, and if that were the case, of course, we would have continued on to Mars. But we didn't, and it was obvious in retrospect why we didn't. I would argue that today, if we think of China as competition, economic competition, which they surely are, then to pull back on our space ambitions is a direct sort of lever arm on our capacity to compete economically.
But so one of the things you talk about in that article is that this is part of a general decline in science and engineering, and a decline of the kind of sexiness of science, but also the amount of time, energy we're putting into it. Well, so my question to you is, why should we use this indirect path to science? If we want to fund science, why not fund science?
Yeah, because that's a common question that always gets asked. And what happens is when you approach the world that way, you find a problem and you say, well, let's put some money to do more of what the solution is to that problem. What they amount to are like Band-Aids on each little problem. So today, we need more scientists, so let's make better science teachers. Put a little Band-Aid there. We want to keep our jobs, so let's make incentives for corporations to not move their manufacturing plant. Little Band-Aid there. And you go around and you put all these Band-Aids down, and you're ignoring a deeper engine that could be operating that would solve all those problems simultaneously.
You worry a lot about the fact that people are getting very cost conscious and and really cutting back. And you tell a story about the Hubble telescope. Explain why it's important and what happened.
Oh, well, in that particular case, it was, the Hubble telescope, as you may remember, when it was launched, the mirror had the wrong curvature to it. Images were fuzzy. So it would be a little while before we'd get that repaired with corrective optics. So what do you do?
Because it's up there in space.
It's up there. You got to mount a mission to go work on it, and you be clever about how you design the corrective, because that problem was not anticipated before Hubble was launched. So you had to be really clever about what you pulled out and what you swapped in. And so there was some downtime, if you will, where you could get data, but it was kind of fuzzy data. So what do? Well, you don't want to waste it. And so an algorithm was developed to extract as much information as you possibly can from these fuzzy images of stars. And that exercise, that algorithm, was shared with a medical doctor who specialized in breast cancer research. And he noted that finding these dots of light in an otherwise sort of fuzzy environment was exactly what he does visually when he's looking for early detection of breast cancer in the mammograms. And so they take this algorithm, apply it. Now they were finding the early detection of breast cancer doing a better job than the human eye was able to do. You can't script that, and that happens all the time. This cross-pollination of fields, innovation in one, stimulating revolutionary changes in another. If you only want to put money to a problem, you can tend to make evolutionary changes, small increments, but the big changes come about when I'm not saying just do space, you need all the sciences. A quick note, all the machines in a hospital that have an on-off switch brought into the service of diagnosing the condition of the human body without cutting you open, they're all based on a principle of physics discovered by a physicist who had no interest in medicine. From the X-ray machine, one of the earliest of these diagnostic tools, to the entire department of radiology,
it's all about light waves.
That and energy out of the atom, the MRI, the PET scans. It's all physicists just doing physics. And so if you say, I want to be healthier, let's put more money in the medical community. No, you got to put money everywhere. But in the school system and in the culture of society, what drives ambitions? There's nothing that drives ambitions the way NASA does. And today's NASA portfolio taps biologists, because we're looking for life on Mars, and chemists and physicists and electrical engineers, mechanical engineers. All the traditional STEM fields, the science, technology, engineering, and math fields, are stoked when you dream big in an agency such as NASA. And it's not that much money. Right now, it's a half a penny on your tax dollar. I say double it to a penny. Right? Then we go to Mars in a big way. In short term, it becomes a big visible project. School kids know about it. And who's that first astronaut class? Today, they're in middle school today. Why not? I got an idea. Let's select them now. And then we all could track, see how, are they eating well? Are they getting good grades? That's tomorrow's Mercury 7.
What would we learn? What is your hope about the Mars mission? Because this is, I mean, clearly part of it is symbolic, but part of it is you actually think there's a lot to learn by going to Mars.
As a scientist, I want to go to Mars and back to asteroids and the moon because I'm a scientist. But I can tell you, I'm not so naive a scientist to think that the nation might not have geopolitical reasons for going into space. NASA was created in a geopolitical climate. We were spooked by Sputnik. Sputnik itself was a hollowed-out intercontinental ballistic missile. With the missile removed, put in a little radio transmitter. So everyone said, oh, it's going beep. The military knew the implication of this. And so the space station itself, the initial impetus was Russia's building their own space station. So I don't have a problem with geopolitical arguments for going into space. Let all the reasons reveal themselves. Tourism, let the private sector go take care of that. I don't have any problems with that. And as a scientist, send me to Mars.
Would you go?
I would so go to Mars. But to low Earth orbit, no. I'm boldly going where hundreds have gone before, no. If you're going to go where nobody's gone before, sign me up. I'll bring my whole family and sign me up.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.